July 2013. The entire world had its eyes glued to Rio de Janeiro, but while the cameras were tracking the Pope, a completely different operation was unfolding off-screen. Operators from BOPE, Rio's elite special forces battalion, were locking down positions the media never saw. Rooftops, alleyways, street corners, ready to drop the hammer in a split second. For days, entire neighborhoods, usually under the iron fist of heavily armed drug cartels, were quietly neutralized. The objective was straightforward on paper, but damn near impossible to pull off. Get the leader of the Catholic Church out of Brazil alive, without the world ever realizing just how close he came to the edge. How did a battalion of fewer than 500 men pull off a total lockdown for the leader of 1.5 billion Catholics, right inside a city where armed factions still called the shots? To understand the sheer scale of the nightmare, you have to understand Rio in 2013. The city had been going through a so-called pacification process for a few years. Special police units were trying to reclaim territories that had been run by drug syndicates for decades. The reality on the ground was highly volatile. Some slums were under police control for months, others only on paper. And the biggest headache wasn't political, it was geographical. The main events for the Pope's visit, World Youth Day, were hosted right next to territories where the government had zero control. Copacabana was flanked by hostile hills. Official routes ran just yards away from active, open-air drug markets. Armed factions still decided who got in and who got out of those streets. If an official motorcade took a wrong turn by just a few yards, it could cross a live tripwire with zero warning. And this wasn't just Brazil's problem. Over 70 countries were sending delegations. The international press was watching every single move. A security breach during a papal visit wouldn't just be a tragedy. It would be a massive diplomatic humiliation, broadcast live to the entire planet. The Vatican demanded ironclad guarantees. The Brazilian government had to prove it could protect its most high-profile guest in decades. And the fix for this problem wasn't going to come from a press conference. It was going to come from a battalion trained to dive into urban warfare and vanish without a trace. BOPE. The planning didn't start days in advance. It started months before. While the public only found out about the schedule a few weeks prior, the battalion was already analyzing every single inch of every possible route. Intelligence went in first. Before a single rifle was even loaded, undercover operators and informants were mapping out who ran what, which syndicate held which corner, where the cartel lookouts were posted, where an enemy sniper would have a clean line of sight on the motorcade. This is the one detail most people don't get about VIP protection in an urban war zone. You don't just secure the street. You have to control everything above it. Buildings overlooking the main strip, church rooftops, slum overlooks. Every single one of those perches was mapped, logged, and when the clock started ticking, locked down by a BOPE sniper, often disguised as a local resident, a construction worker, anything but a cop. Meanwhile, on the ground, camouflage teams slipped into the communities before any public advisory went out. The goal wasn't to clear the streets or make mass arrests. It was to establish silent dominance over the territory. No one could know exactly when or where BOPE was going to strike, and BOPE didn't do it alone. The operation hooked in the Army, the Federal Police, and the Navy. Every agency had a hard assignment. The Army locked down the outer perimeters. The Feds handled direct security for the foreign dignitaries. The Navy locked down access via the bay. It was a clockwork machine. Every single gear was trained to be flawless, because in this line of work, there are no do-overs. A miscalculation doesn't buy you a warning shot. It buys you a global headline. And there was an invisible layer of pressure that never made it to the TV screen. Every agency involved knew they were being graded by the world. Brazil had to prove, in real time, that it could secure one of the most high-value targets on Earth, inside a territory that global media had spent months painting as an active war zone. Hours before every papal movement, the city shifted. It wasn't a sudden, massive occupation. It was surgical, point by point, block by block. Teams pushed in and locked it down. High ground first, then the choke points, then the perimeter of the actual route. They used a concentric security ring model, an outer ring controlling who entered the zone, an intermediate ring watching the alleys and side streets cutting into the main line, and an inner ring, right in the thick of the crowd, eyeball to eyeball with people standing inches away from the Pope-mobile. And that's exactly where things got dangerous. Not just from a coordinated hit, but from the sheer chaos of the crowd itself. Hundreds of thousands of people packed into tight spaces, shoving, screaming, desperate to get close. Every operator on that line knew one brutal truth. It only takes one person. A single armed individual, blending in with thousands of faithful followers, would be enough to turn a mass into a massacre. And you can't frisk a crowd of that size. Security had to rely entirely on behavioral analysis, constant profiling, and the raw instinct of men who spent years identifying threats in a fraction of a second. Up on the roofs, snipers kept their glass locked on the crowd and the surrounding buildings. Their job wasn't just to return fire, it was to read the play, to spot anomalies before they turned into hard targets. Behind the scenes, an emergency response protocol was primed and ready to trigger at any second. If a shot rang out, for any reason, extraction teams had pre-mapped escape routes to pull the Pope out of the kill zone in under 10 seconds. Armored vehicles were staged just off the route, ready to block incoming fire and act as mobile shields. Tactical medics were embedded in the crowd, fully geared for immediate trauma care. None of this made the live broadcast. The cameras showed the Pope smiling, kissing babies, and walking through the masses. What they didn't show was the heavily armed, razor-sharp machine running just feet away, praying they wouldn't have to pull the trigger. When the motorcade rolled into the Varginha community in Manguinhos, one of the most volatile stretches of the trip, the operation hit its highest stress point. Hundreds of military police, dozens of federal agents, and army troops completely sealed off the slum before the Pope arrived. Every single house along that strip was cleared beforehand. No window, no rooftop, no balcony was left unmonitored. This was a territory that, just months prior, was trading heavy gunfire between cops and drug traffickers. On that day, for a few hours, it became one of the most heavily fortified spots on the planet. And the Pope-mobile kept rolling, slow, no over-the-top aggressive military escort, because they couldn't let it look like a war zone, but secured from every single angle, by eyes trained to neutralize a threat instantly if it came down to it. It didn't come down to it. By the time the visit wrapped up, the papal delegation left Brazil without a single security incident on the books. The international press raved about the execution. They talked about the faith, the massive crowds, and the Pope's message to the youth. Almost no one mentioned the battalion that spent months budgeting every single yard of that route. And that is exactly how you measure a win. A successful security operation doesn't make the front page. It doesn't go viral. There are no heroic photo ops or victory speeches. The success is measured by absolute silence. The greatest security operations are the ones you never hear about. The ultimate win is when it looks like nothing happened at all. While the world watched a man in white walk through a crowd, an entire battalion was working behind the curtain to make it look easy. It wasn't. Did you know the backstory behind this lockdown? Drop a comment below if you had any idea what it took to pull this off. And if this video gave you a look at tactical security you've never seen before, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got a lot more classified operations waiting to be uncovered.